No, then you're right.
There we go, mate. How are you?
Not bad, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad.
Happy
I'm a
birthday.
little behind with this whole technological thing, but I'll endeavour to do my best.
All right, yeah. Yeah, happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's it's weird, isn't it? Birthdays. Once you get past 16, it ceases to sort of have its meaning. I
Yeah, I
just
know what
like
you
after
mean.
I turned like after 16, I was like, right, I'm not going to count the numbers.
Yeah.
I daren't.
I know what I mean. Like the idea of having a birthday gathering just seems far too much effort these days.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Everyone was like, "So you can have a party and all that." I was like, "No, no, no way."
Where are you in London?
I'm in South London. Yeah, Greenwich at the moment. Yeah.
Greenwich. Okay, cool.
How about
Um,
you?
I'm up in Manchester,
Oh, nice. Which part?
Elmston. It's just
Oh, cool.
Greater Manchester, yeah. But
Nice one.
yeah, but yeah, cheers for sending me all that info. Like it's
Quite a
interesting
lot.
stuff. I think it's fair to say you've had a relatively unusual upbringing in life, really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You could say that. That's one way of saying it. Definitely, yeah.
But you were kind of born into music, into a music kind of culture.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in a above the studios called Underhill Studios, and it was a studio on Blackheath Hill in South London, and it had the likes of Squeeze. I think the only ones came there a few times. Uh, Genesis, Bowie, Lou Reed, um, yeah, Iggy Pop. So I mean, as a kid, I remember hearing them like downstairs and hearing the music, and yeah, it's always been there, definitely, and I think my mother was working on the door at the time and booking some of the acts, and it was primarily owned by my father's side of the family, which they then shifted it to New Cross. But yeah, it was. I mean, I don't remember much of it because I was very little, but I do remember um, it was always, there was always something going on. Rehearsals went way on into the night, and yeah, it was great. It was a great way to start. I mean, certainly, I didn't like. I wasn't one of those kids who grew up thinking, "Oh, I'll be a musician." I just think it just it came to me because it was familiar without me knowing it was familiar. If you know what I mean, instinctual. Mm.
Yeah, and you mentioned Iggy Pop, and you said there was a story about him reading you a bedtime story or
Yeah,
something.
you know how it is when you're a kid and you have maybe two books that you've read over and over and over. I just remember him coming in the room very, very faintly. And because I knew the book inside out, he completely changed it. And it almost went from sort of innocent kind of traditional English storytelling to down and dirty Detroit streets. Yeah. I wish I'd recorded that. That would have been, who knows, maybe you could have an Iggy Pop bedtime story session, like tapes for young'uns.
Yeah, I wonder if has he done. A lot of people do that. CBeebies story time now, don't they? I wonder if he's ever done that.
Possibly it could that could be another source of income for him.
Yeah, but were these the type of people? You mentioned that you didn't know who your dad was initially. Like, what was he?
Well,
Were they knocking around
yeah,
with people like Iggy Pop, basically? Yeah.
I didn't meet my father till I was 27 years old. So quite a lot later in life. I tracked him down. He was actually doing this one-off kind of thing of giving drum lessons, and I found it through another source and called him up, and it was quite awkward, but we managed to meet. And he was a drummer in a group called Up with Jeff Beck, and he then later went to play with Jeff Beck solo as well. Killing Joke and Tears for Fears, Paul Weller, just tons of people that I've, you know what I mean? The first time I saw him actually, though, was on television. My grandma just said to me out of the blue, "Oh, your dad's on TV," you know, and it was, I don't know if you remember Nebworth. They used to do a series of concerts each year, and it was always like a big rock concert, and they had Tears for Fears playing, and I looked at my father on the drums, and it was quite a chilling moment. I didn't really know what I was feeling, but it was quite I mean, it was unmistakably, I was looking at me, you know, it was kind of weird.
Yeah. It's strange because I just had a bit of a thing like this. I don't know if you've been on that ancestry.com, have you?
Do you know what? I wanted to. I've been meaning to do that because other people in my family do, but no, I'd like to. Certainly.
Yeah, well, like my friend gave me a free pass for it, and ended up matching someone that said it was my first cousin. But long story short, it turns out she's actually my half sister, and
No way. Oh
and
wow.
like who she thought was her dad isn't a dad, and we actually share the same dad that I grew up with, but she didn't. So like she's going through all this kind of thing at the minute.
Wow.
But he passed away a while ago, so it's I don't know. It's difficult for her to get her head around, obviously.
Sure. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, once you're kind of given an idea of who you are and what you are and how it relates in family, I think it's very difficult to then see other. I mean, it's kind of like what you said there with my father. I mean, I grew up primarily um, my with my stepfather Andy Clark, who also he played on that David Bowie's Ashes to Ashes, and uh, you know, Jeff Beck as well, and he kind of raised me. It was a very sort of, you know, taking me to gigs and showing me the ropes, and he was more like a father to me, really, because, you know, we spent a lot of time together, and me and my dad really, throughout his life, he passed away in 2017. We only met a few times, and never for too long either, only for like several hours. And sometimes it would be at concerts he was playing with Manfred Mann. So yeah, I mean, it's just the way it goes, isn't it? Families are very sort of temperamental. I don't know of any family really that is quote unquote perfect, you know, like in the Hollywood movies or anything like that. I think every family has its secrets and its shadows.
No, yeah, definitely know what you mean. But I mean, I guess like this idea that your family are connected to music in the way they are. Was it just like second nature for you to meet these big people in music, kind of thing?
Well, I mean, they would, especially with my stepdad. I remember him taking me to Pete Parrott's house a lot, and that's how I got to meet his sons Jamie and Peter, that I know you know as well. Um, and you know, it just, I've had this kind of thing all throughout my life where I've kind of just stumbled into these situations. You know, whether it was someone that I knew, who knew that person, or you know, it's just kind of these things just seem quite natural experiences. They just seem to pop up here and there, and you know, I have kind of like really good luck, and then I have really bad luck in when it comes to the whole sort of meeting the right people, so to speak. You know, like, so it varies really, but yeah, I mean, certainly that would have been from day one, because you know, living above Underhill, I mean, it's allegedly, I don't know if this is the truth or not, obviously, but it's allegedly where Bowie went there used to be an outside toilet. Apparently David Bowie took his acoustic guitar, went downstairs and wrote Ziggy Stardust out there.
Really? Wow.
But yeah, so it was like, you know, things like this were people coming in and out all the time, and yeah, I mean, it was quite intense at times, you know. But it was also very normal, you know. I didn't really see it as anything. I imagined all kids to live like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean when you're in that situation as a kid, you don't really see any different, I guess. Yeah.
No.
And in terms of picking up a guitar, then was that kind of a thing that happened early for you?
Yeah, I might have been about 8, I think, 8, and then doing that thing of just looking at it in the corner of the room, looking at it, going, oh yeah, I'll pick it up one day. And then finally, when I did, it was just I kind of took to it like a duck to water. Really, it came very natural to me to, you know, I wasn't very good at many things, but the guitar I seemed to pick up and gel with and ride out, you know, where if I try other things, I'd sort of desert them, but this seemed to be something that would stay with me and be really important to help me develop other relationships and friendships that I might not have done had I not gotten into music. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yes, and I've got to ask you about this thing with, is it Esther Hansen or Kilroy or something?
Yeah, I was quite wild when I was younger. You know, I used to really dress up. So I used to have like full on makeup, shave my legs, and wear fishnet tights and heels. And I was really big part of that sort of gothic kind of scene. You know, I loathe labels like that because I like a whole variety of different things, but rated in those circles. And I remember going to school, and it was quite funny. My headmaster hauled me in, and you know, he always claimed to be this liberal guy, but for some reason, he was having a go at me for the way I was looking, saying, "Oh, you know, you can't dress like that," and almost asking me to define it, what it's about. And he said, "You know, you'll never get anywhere looking like that." And then the phone rang, and it was a BBC calling and inquiring, and my mum was on the other line. Oh, they've asked you to be on Esther Ranson's program about fashion, which is strange because I got a few of them. Do you remember Kilroy as well?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think, like, I don't know how they found out about me, but they're like, okay, here's a guy who sort of dresses up and he's in his teens. And I mean, certainly I didn't know anyone really at my age. I'd have been about 17 when I went Esther Ranson that dressed the way I did at that point. Now it's, you know, you can see that everywhere, but back then it was quite controversial. And
Was
another
this
thing
like
I
the late
remember,
90s or something?
that would have been 95.
Right,
And
okay.
I'll never forget because there was a guy on there who was somehow connected to the Conservatives, and he was like on the judging panel of, it was called it was about what was good taste and bad taste. So they were like a whole bunch of people in their different outfits on and stuff. And he said, "Oh, you know, it's shocking," or something like that about my image, which I don't think he really felt. I just felt he had to say it for the camera type thing.
Mm.
And I made a wisecrack, obviously, about how some Conservative MPs have been caught wearing fishnet tights too, and it didn't go down too well. But because I think literally, like, I don't know, maybe 6 months earlier, one had been caught with like suspenders and stockings and hung himself and done himself in or something.
Oh wow, okay.
So, yeah, that got edited out. But it was kind of exciting to dress that way and be on stage with that. I mean, I was already playing music by the time I was 14 and dressing up, and yeah, it was quite an exciting time as a teenager, all that really, and I was, the kind of, at that point the scene I was connected to was very underground. There was sort of, I used to frequent a place called Slimelight down in Angel, Islington. It's still there now, but I mean, it was very different back then. You had to know someone. It was like a secret club, so you had to know someone who could sign you in to get into the club, and then eventually, once they'd sort of sussed you out, they might give you membership. And I quite liked that. It was like something out of a movie. There's this secret underground club, because certainly around then, I suppose grunge and indie was at its height, and goth was kind of seen as this like forgotten thing, but actually it was, Slimelight had a couple of thousand people going there. Oh, I like the dog.
Ah, cheers, mate.
What breed?
King Charles Cavalier.
Oh, how old?
Age 3, three and a
Oh,
half.
really cute. Looks well at home.
Just enjoying the bed without any sheets on.
But yeah, so the scene was good, and then that's how I kind of got in bands and started playing guitar with a few goth groups and touring and getting used to that. And by the time I was 19, I remember playing this big goth festival at Astoria, and it was that was when I decided, okay, maybe I should look at doing this professionally. And I mean, back then you could get paid well. I mean, I know a lot of people say, oh, they really like the fact that we have all this unlimited social media presence and this and that, and you can, but I quite like the old-fashioned way of, you get signed, you get paid. You play a gig, you get paid a nice wage. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah,
quite like that. I mean, looking at how the industry's changed now, I mean, it's barely recognizable, But then again,
yeah.
I suppose the world is, it's changed a hell of a lot since I was a teenager.
Yeah. So like when the 2000s roll around, and this scene starts kicking off, this indie scene. Like what are your thoughts? And obviously coming from like a goth kind of perspective, were you
Well,
into it straight away or not really?
oh yeah, well, the thing is, like I said, I had a really eclectic taste of music. So I have to admit, I didn't frequent indie clubs as much in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, just because every time I went there, I, I don't want to blame Oasis or that kind of time, but it seemed that a lot of the fans of bands like Oasis and that were very masculine and very, they didn't know what I was about. And ironically, that didn't put me off bands like Happy Mondays. Actually, I quite like the fact that they look like the type of guys that might nick your car after a show or something. You know what I mean? I was well into that. And when I met all those bands, they were really cool and really nice people. But there was this kind of prevalent thing of, oh, you know, you look a bit like a queer mate. I had it quite a lot at indie clubs, you know what I mean? And that began to change, I noticed, as I guess the time that we were talking about later on, from say 2002. And I have to, it actually, that whole scene seemed to be a bit more open. All of a sudden men didn't have to be, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. Yeah, I think that was helped by bands like the Libertines, wasn't it? It was more like of an open-minded thing about it. Yeah.
When I met Peter, the first time I was going out with a girl called Heidi at the time, and she was really good friends with him. And I'll never forget, he came over to me and, oh, this is your boyfriend, to her. And he took my hand and he kissed it. And I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. This, because that would not have happened 5 years prior, on that scene. You know what I mean? Like, and I think also they were a lot more flamboyant, those bands. You know what I mean? I mean, even like the others were quite, you know, I mean, they sort of had a kind of thing going on with makeup, and I noticed that a lot of the bands around then, you know, was sort of pulling out the eyeliner and that, and so
Yeah.
maybe that's one of the reasons why I felt a bit more comfortable. Not that I have to be surrounded by loads of people who look the same. Do you know what I mean? Like I've got a variety of friends. I mean, I even like some hip hop. I like some rock. I like some country. You know, I like some electronic music. I like it all across the board. But that scene was an exciting time, and I think a lot of the reason why it was so exciting, the fans were just incredible. You know, their absolute dedication, you know, and their spirit. You know, they love to have fun. I remember the first time my old band Scuzzies, when we were, Peter had come round to my place and he said, "Oh, got this Christmas do going on at the Astoria. Are you in?" I was like, "Fuck yeah," you know. My band had only been together really for a short period of time, and of course, I don't know if you remember, but he didn't show up. And there
Okay.
was a whole riot at the Astoria. All the kids went mental and smashed it. I think the Noisettes played that night, the Towers of London. Do you remember the IVs? I think that was Scarborough Steve's band.
Yeah, heard about them a few times on
He was
here.
in the
Yeah.
yeah, and it was a pretty cool night, and I was really nervous because I thought, oh god, you know, no one knows who we are, and when we turned up, we were obviously first on. The crowd were amazing. You know, they actually gave us. I thought we weren't that good that night, but they were really up for it, and you know, and it was this amazing spirit that never went away in that scene. You know, people were so enthusiastic to find out about bands and to find out about, you know, where they were coming from and what they were singing about. And that's kind of how, because beforehand, I've got to admit, I wasn't a massive fan of the Libertines, but when I met Peter and I got to know him and I got to see the kind of saga that he was living, it suddenly the music made more sense to me because I could relate. I could sort of understand what was going on in his life at that time and all around our scene, you know, a little bubble of friends. And it was pretty exciting. You know, I don't really think there's really been anything like that since. It was a really magical scene.
Mm.
And I know this is going to sound really like syrupy, but the fans and the bands did have that real connection. You know, whether it was, you know, the guerrilla gigs or there just seemed to be there seemed to be like no division there, and an honest thing, you know what I mean? Not oh, no division, I'm going to come out and sign a few autographs. Like a real division, no division of like people just, you know what I mean? Everyone was in it together, and I think that there was a sort of mutual trust between the fans and the bands. You know what I mean? As you probably remembered, you know what I mean? It was a great time. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's like you know, a big thing of the podcast is like, you know, we're looking back on it rose tinted, or was it genuinely unique? And I think it was quite unique, really,
I
especially
loved it.
given where we are today, like you said, yeah.
Well, I think back then, you know, people socialized more. They weren't so withdrawn and stuck in on social media. You could go out, you could meet people, and it was always great stories. You know, someone always had a great story to tell, and people had great, you know, just great characters as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you remember Mateo? He had the Duke Parents pub.
Okay.
You remember him? He was like wild, and then like Rhythm Factory, which is, you know, which is kind of another way of how I got to know everyone, because Mark Keds, he was doing that Bring Your Own Poison night there, and it was just, yeah, it really, I don't think we're looking at through rose tinted glasses. I think it was just genuinely an exciting time, and I think opportunities were more readily available. You know, like it wasn't that hard really getting a record deal back then, or you know what I mean? It's like if you had the look and you played, you didn't have to be like a mastermind on guitar. You know what I mean? Few chords, bang. You know, if you could write a good tune, you scrubbed up well, it was all good.
So were you like the main songwriter in the band? Like, how would it work at that point? Sorry, the one that ended up recording with Gordon Raphael, yeah.
Oh, the Scuzzies, yeah. Yeah, I was pretty much, you know. And that band was sort of, it had a whole bunch of lineups, but we'd sort of start and then we'd stop and then we'd try it again. And when Gordon got involved, that sort of led to us getting our first sort of indie deal.
How did he get involved then?
Do you know what? I think our guitar, that's it. We had a guitar player called Federico who knew him. But ironically, I'd met him way before that when I was touring in a goth band, and his band had opened for that band.
Ah, right. Okay.
He was in a band called Sky Prize Mary. So, but yeah, he was quite a name at that point. I remember like when our manager at the time, who was, I don't know if you remember Nina Antonia, she wrote like the Johnny Thunders book, the Pete Parrott book, and New York Dolls book, and she was like managing us. And I remember when she said, "Oh God, you wouldn't believe it. You mentioned the name Gordon Raphael," and all the labels suddenly, you know what I mean, lit up. And like, because that Strokes album was so successful. I mean, it really permeated culture to such a degree. At first, I have to admit, I wasn't overly into Strokes, but I did get into them sort of later on, after that initial hype, and it was a fault really of the media, because they were saying stuff like, "Oh, this is like the Voidoids or like Velvet Underground," and of course it wasn't. It just happened to be from New York. Do you know what I mean? But I thought it was really good, and I loved the melodies. And New York City Cops is still one of my favorites of theirs. And so when I heard that, and I heard, you know, the records that we were trying to replicate were very much like the Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers, LAMF sessions. And once I said that to Gordon, he was like, "Yeah." He was really great in the studio. Like he had a studio down in Limehouse at the time, and we just recorded in there, and we got it all done in one day. And he said, I think we'd get it like in the second or third take even. But yeah, that opened quite a few doors for us to then do other things. And of course it was a talking point, and yeah, we got our deal out of it. I mean, it wasn't an incredible deal, but it managed to, you know how it is. It's every little thing is like a notch up the ladder. And that definitely propelled us into the next level of work.
What year were you recording with him?
2006.
Okay, so it was a few years later after
Strokes. But he still kind of had that. I mean, that definitely led to us getting. They wanted to release the label that we ended up signing. Wanted to release one of the demos actually initially to garner interest, and it kind of went from there. And the Scuzzy was fun. I mean, we got to play a lot of fun gigs.
Yeah, I probably saw you play then at some point if you were playing gigs like that.
Yeah, so we got a few things, but we were never propelled to the league where we could have been. And I think, well, at that point, indie music was totally saturated, and we weren't really. I mean, you know what I mean? We liked. It's not. We did like indie music, but we weren't really strictly an indie band. You know what I mean? Like you could. I mean, kind of. I don't know what you could. I suppose we were really about recreating that sort of New York City punk sound, but sort of making it more of the sort of noughties time. You know, giving it an infusion of. So trying to bring it to the present, you know. But I think for whatever reason, you know, because we stopped and started, things didn't really go as according to plan. And by the time eventually when we were like doing bigger shows and we were on tour with Babyshambles, and we'd cut the track with Peter and called On the Corner and stuff like that, where sometimes he'd guest with us on stage with that, and it suddenly we were sort of becoming a part of, you know, the bigger picture. Unfortunately, you know, there were things going on in the band, like for example the bass player and the drummer started seeing each other, and that never ends well. I remember we were on the road, and I was sitting with these two fans from Italy they're staying at the same hotel as us, and we were going to play, I think it was the Birmingham O2 with Babyshambles that night. And we were laughing because next door we could hear what sounded like a bit of a Barney going on between a couple.
Right.
And we're sort of giggling, you know what I mean? Like typical type thing. And then there was a knock at the door, and our driver came and said, Jerome, Nick and Laura, who was the bass player and drummer, are arguing. And suddenly it was like E equals MC squared, you know, the equation went over.
Light bulb moment, yeah.
Oh, fuck. They're arguing. Shit, that must mean they're seeing each other. And of course, they later admitted that they were. And it was really bad. So on the way back, we played a great gig at Nottingham Rock City that night, second night. And I just remember getting all these sort of offers from agents and bigger labels. But I just knew the band was over. I knew it couldn't sustain. And also, you know, I mean, I'd written a lot of those songs when I was like 17, 18. And the music kind of began to lose its sort of, I don't know. I can't really look back on that. I can't listen to the album for pleasure. Whereas I could listen to Dead Cuts, which was the next project I did with Mark. And look back on that more fondly because we achieved, not just because we achieved a lot more, but I just preferred the records, the feel of the records that we went on to do.
Yeah. So just going back to the song that Pete Doherty was on, like, how does that come about?
I was just playing it on guitar. He had a 1-bedroom flat in Whitechapel, and he went, "Oh, that's fucking great. Let's record it." It was just like that. But it took years to make it actually happen. In fact, so long that it only ended up getting recorded in 2010.
Oh, right,
so
wow.
all the way from 2004 to 2010, and we recorded it up at you had this house out in the countryside.
Oh yeah, I went there once. Yeah,
it was cool, wasn't it?
It was mad, yeah.
And I remember like Mick Whitnell, the Babyshambles guitarist, he had a studio in there, and we just recorded it in there. It was fantastic. You know, it's a great song, and it's probably my favorite song of all those. But actually, it never came out the way it was meant to. We did. So basically, Peter wrote a verse for it, and for some reason, I don't know if, you know, because we're up all night partying and that, I don't know if it got lost in transit. So the version you hear on the record is actually not the version we wanted to release.
Okay.
It was the warm-up version of the song. But the label, like, we've got to put this out now. And I don't know if Mick could find the actual version or it got lost. I can't remember the reason now, but it's still, I still think it's got merit, you know, and people still like it. People still buy it. And
so what record did it come out on? Was it just a single or was it an album?
Scuzzy's album just called The Scuzzies, and it came in 2011. But then, of course, we broke up pretty much after recording that. And that's when Mark Kids asked me to join Dead Cuts, which, you know, was the next step really in where I was going. And I felt, you know, musically it was a more mature venture, and more in alignment with what I wanted to say and what I wanted to reflect, you know, at the time.
And, you know, you did mention, you know, you were getting into hard drugs quite early. Like, was that a thing that kind of went on through those early times?
Yeah. I mean, I've suffered all my life with, I've got fibromyalgia, which is like, so I get a lot of aches and pains in my body. And also I suffered a lot of anxiety. And the trouble with drugs is that I remember one night someone offered me, you know, some heroin, and I tried it, and it took away all the anxiety. It took away all the body pain. And this was like in the middle of a really strenuous tour, and I was like, oh God, you know, it was very readily available in South London. Yeah, and then of course, I suppose the darker side of that time, even though I took it very early on in my very early teen years, it suddenly became a very fashionable thing, that drug, in the scene we were a part of. So I wasn't really judged. I wasn't told to rein it in at any point. And I can imagine that probably had its effects on my musical career, because, you know, no one really wants to get behind that. You know, it doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter how much money you've got. It will consume you in the end. And it took me a long time to be able to walk away from that. And a lot of great times too. I don't want to say it was like, oh, it's drug nightmare. I had plenty of great times, but essentially I was doing it so I could function rather than doing it to be cool. And I did sort of believe that lie, that sort of thing of, oh, to be, you know, that kind of jazz thing of, oh, to be great, you have to do that, you know, when you're very young and you know, you're learning the ropes, and you think, well, yeah, you know. But yeah, mainly it was because I just, sometimes I thought, well, how am I going to get through this tour, or how am I going to get through this day, or do you know what I mean? So I don't think I went in there to do it to be cool or anything like that. And I saw a lot of people on the scene just doing it because our bands they liked were doing it, you know. But that certainly was never why I did it. No.
No, it's interesting. Like I was reading Pete Doherty's book again recently, and he kind of said, you know, at the time you felt like people needed to catch up in terms of the way they thought about drugs, the way that, like, you know, the other libertines would look at him. He felt like they were almost being ignorant. Like, he felt like it was a perfectly acceptable thing to be doing, and that you could function with it. Is that how you felt, or was it a bit different for you?
Well, I mean, I think at first you can, you know, at first the whole thing is, you know, and if you've got money coming in, you think, well, why stop? You know, it's helping me function, it's helping me get through the gig, it's helping me write and record. And then eventually what ends up happening is the reverse happens. So one day you're on your way to do a show, you're calling up your dealer and you can't get them on the phone. And then you're really in trouble, because it's not like you know, you can't, if you don't do that, you're going to get ill, really physically ill. So I think that's when that drug starts to have its downsides, and people, it ends up affecting everything you do, it ends up affecting everyone around you. You know what I mean? It's sort of one of these things. I mean, people's attitudes did change, because up to that point, everyone was like ease and maybe cocaine. And I always found it a bit sort of like a bit contradictory of the music business, when there'd be a guy there going, don't do drugs, son. And then he'd be there like snorting a line. I'd be like, and he said, but this is okay, but that's not. You know, I just always thought that was a bit silly. It's like, you know, but you know, I remember going to an NME meeting, and this guy sat down. He just suddenly did a coke, like line of coke, and I was like, what? He said, well, this is okay, just as long as you don't do the other stuff. I'm like, you know.
Yeah, that's mad, isn't it?
But it was
yeah.
prevalent, yeah, definitely prevalent on that scene. And I just think a lot of the reasons why it was because a multitude of reasons. I wouldn't just say the bands. I think people were a bit more open about experimenting, and prior to that, I don't, you know, obviously people throughout music scene like Keith Richards or Sid Vicious, whoever, you know, have been there, but it's this kind of, once it became a mainstream thing, it seemed that was all the bloody tabloids to write about, wasn't it? I mean, particularly in Pete's case. Yeah.
And just in terms of like, did it make you feel more creative or more connected with people? Kind of thing.
Well, in the beginning, yeah, but then also, because like I said, I suffer anxiety, so I could relax and deal with, you know, like I'd be in, say, a club somewhere, instead of being like, you know, I'd be really relaxed and chilled out. And so I thought it was really important that I had it, and if I didn't have it, that it would be detrimental, actually. You know, yeah, it was. Also, I think when you're younger, you kind of have an attitude of, well, fuck it, I don't care what other people think. I'm going to do what I need to do to get by. You know, it was always that for me, really, more than oh, I'm gonna be another like rock and roll cliche or something.
Yeah.
And the irony was that, you know, like when I was a younger teenager, all I really cared about was dancing and girls. You know, it wasn't really until I got involved in the industry that it sort of became a thing. You know. Yeah.
And do you find? Go on, sorry.
No, just saying. So it would take away, like I said, anxiety, pressure. If you didn't feel well, because often, you know, you hadn't slept because you're going to do a gig in wherever, you know, and certainly if you're going to Europe and that, and you needed something to get you through the show, it was more like that, really, more than like, I'm going to be naughty and do
that. Yeah. And like, just in terms of songwriting, does it become the sole focus of like your songwriting and stuff, drugs? Like, is that all encompassing in that way, or not really?
Well, I think in the beginning, but that's another reason probably why I have a bit of difficulty listening to Scuzzy's album, because that's, I'd say, like 80% of the lyrical content and what we were about. Whereas when I went to do Dead Cuts and Mark, it was like about a multitude of things and a multitude of topics. And Mark was really great, actually, because when I joined Dead Cuts, I don't know how much you know about Mark, but he was in the Census things, and then he in the Wild Hearts for a bit, and he co-wrote Can't Stand Me Now.
Okay, right.
You'll see him credited as Hamilton. I don't know if you read that. There's one biography of Peter where it sort of mentions that moment where they wrote the song together. But sorry, where was I? Oh yeah, so Dead Cuts. So when I first joined there, he'd been clean for quite a long time, and when we were doing our first gigs, dealers would obviously turn up, and he would chase them out of the room. You know, he'd say "fuck off," you know, and that taught me how to perform without drugs and how to not rely on them. And obviously, it still took a bit of time, but he really helped me on that level, because, you know, he'd been through it in a big way too, and he showed me ultimately that music could be a healing thing, It could be something that, you know, because prior to that, I always found music kind of a painful endeavor, in the sense that, you know, you're writing about things you've been through. So it would be a bit like going to a counseling session. You know, no one really likes them. You know what I mean? Like, so it's, but then with Mark, I don't know, it became a bit more meditative and prayer-like, and, you know, Dead Cuts had their moment. You know, we had a great run, really, you know, until Mark passed away, which was really sad.
Yeah, I mean, the gigs you mentioned is like, it's like a who's who of music at some point. But the story about you playing in Paris without a passport, what happened there?
Yeah. So it was one week that Peter came to play the Toriano down in Kentish Town, and he said to me, "Oh, do you want to come? Do you guys want to come and do 2 gigs in Paris?" Yeah, of course. You know, why not? It'd be great. And anyway, I suddenly realized I didn't have a passport. And then everyone said, well, it doesn't matter, because you can get a passport. And, you know, these days you just pay a bit of extra money and it's fine, you know. But because mine had gone missing, they said, oh, you'll have to wait a month before you can get out. And of course, that would have been too late. I'd have missed, you know, Peter was talking about a few days away. So we sat there and we were like, how are we going to do this? And Mark said to me, oh, I'll tell you what we'll do. I've done it before. You just sneak into the country and you know, I said, yeah, when was that? The 90s, right? And he went, yeah, exactly. And I'll never forget, as we sat there, the news was on and it said, today we're going to be checking for asylum seekers coming into Paris. And I was just like, oh,
wow.
God. But I knew I had to do it. I thought, fuck it, let's just do it. And yeah, I hid under this, there was this couch. It was just perfect, like on the in the tour vehicle, and I just hid under it, and we got through.
Well, I'm back as well. Was it not so bad coming back?
Well, the way back was a bit of a different story. So we go out there, we do the 2 shows with Peter, and they were brilliant. I don't know if you ever saw the video, but we got up and we did Pipe Down with them on the second night.
Yeah, did he send me it?
Yeah,
yeah, it's great. Yeah,
it was just a magical time. It was really exciting. It was sort of still quite early period of Dead Cuts, and we're coming back, and right, Jerome, it's time to hide now. And I remember this witch I knew at the time had given me this runic symbol, and she said, "You hold on to that, you'll be able to get past the security, no problem." And I was sort of like, okay, well, this is all I've got, so I might as well just run with it, you know. So I get underneath the couch, and our driver, I don't know why I did this, maybe nerves or something, he crashes into customs. So in that little booth they have on the side.
Oh wow, okay.
He goes, bam, that's it. They're like, I could hear them outside, like, we're gonna search this fucking vehicle now. And I'm just like, and we had a really optimistic tour manageress. She was always like trying to say, like, you know, things are a bit hairy. She'd sort of say, don't worry, everything's gonna be all right. And she just suddenly went, that's it, we're fucked. And I thought, if she's saying that, then we definitely are. Do you know what I mean? They come on board and it's like sniffer dogs and you know, like the French like police and stuff. And this guy, sort of like Inspector Clouseau type, you know, typical French cop. He's got like a torch and he's coming right up to my face like this. And I'm like thinking, I'm just holding still, clutching this like runic symbol in my hand, going, oh.
Well, like, where were you stood? You weren't hiding at this point.
No, I was underneath I was still underneath the couch.
Oh right, so okay.
And he's shining a torch, obviously looking for contraband or whatever. And he just stops and he looks like that. I thought, oh, you've seen me. And then he starts going like that. And then I'm thinking, what's going on here? And I thought, oh, any minute they're going to horse out. And then he just got up and, no, it's fine, you can go.
What?
And went, what? So several things went through my mind. I thought, I really thought this musician has forgotten his passport, but I highly doubt that. The thing is, they could also keep you for several months, apparently, without a passport in jail.
Wow.
Which I was told after the fact. The band said, "Oh yeah, by the way, we didn't want to tell you at the time, but no, it was a great experience. That was fantastic." And I remember calling my mum up. I was just like, "Where have you been?" I said, "Oh, Paris." "Well, how did you get there? You don't have a passport." Like, "Oh, you're never going to believe it." And instead of like telling me off, she went, "Oh, I'm really proud of you." I was like, "Oh, good."
Yeah, that witch sorted you out there then.
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely the runic symbols have never let me down since. So that was a really powerful, exciting time. I mean, you know, Peter's been very generous like that when it's come to shows, you know, and it meant we would go to France quite a few times. We went shortly after that back out there to play in the Jane Club, which is where Jim Morrison was like the last club he went to before he died or something. And we remember we were playing there, and it was really funny. I think me and Pete were playing. Yeah, we played Pipe Down that night too, right? So we're playing, and this guy walks in at the bar. It was like just gone midnight, dressed up as Jim Morrison. And I'm nudging Pete and I'm saying, "Can you see that? Can you see that?" And he's going, "Yeah, what the fuck?" And I later found out it was a guy that just does it for a laugh. He goes there to sort of freak people out, to think he's like a ghost. But yeah, many great nights in France. We did the very last Babyshambles gig in Le Havre. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, probably not. It's like a port town in France, and that was with Babyshambles. That was another great show. You know, all the French gigs.
We got to the point where, yeah, you're talking about Babyshambles in France, because yeah, it does seem like he's got quite a big following over there.
Oh yeah, I mean, out there, the fans were really cool. I remember we went to, we were all going back to our hotel, and they were really sweet. They went out and bought me food and brought it to the hotel. It was really nice. But this one fan pointed out something that actually kind of made sense to me. She said, "Oh, it's really good, like the way that you're all characters on it, you know, like so." Peter's kind of like the sort of Sid Vicious stroke poet. Wolfman's this kind of cool, like sort of character that you could imagine from sort of the Byron era, you know. And then they said, "Oh, you're a bit like the vampire." and that's another thing that I really liked, was none of us were trying to copy each other. We all had our own thing going on, you know, whether musically, sartorially. And I think that's another reason why that whole scene worked, was because everybody just felt very free and they could express themselves, you know, as they saw fit. Yeah, like I said, I don't think there'll be another like it, really. France is just amazing. I remember actually a really funny thing. Me and Mark went to Père Lachaise Cemetery, you know, where Jim Morrison's buried and Edith Piaf, and we were there, and we were sort of, we'd been up all night and we'd still had our makeup on. It was sort of like looked like we were mannequins at this point, you know. We hadn't got any sleep, and we're walking around that graveyard. It started to get a little bit dark, and we thought it'd be really good fun to like hide in the crypt and scream at people through the bars. And we went into this crypt, and he's like, "Right, quick, close the door, close the door." and we're going, ah, people every time they walk past. And I said, okay, we better get back because we've got, you know, it was the second night and we had to be at sound check. And then someone go to move the gate. It's fucking locked, isn't it? So we spent like 45 minutes screaming for help. But you can imagine anyone who walked past us didn't want to give us any help. You know what I mean? They're like, oh my God, you know, what's going on there? There's two corpses trying to get out of a tomb.
So what happened? Someone let you out?
Eventually, they had this guy who seemed like an eternity, but he eventually came in the end, a whole bunch of keys and got us out. Yeah.
Did you have some kind of like deal with the Dead Cut Sound, like a record deal or anything?
No, again, that was an indie deal. We ironically we got offered a few as we were doing the very final recording. I remember when we were at Conk Studios, which is where the Kinks, I think it's, yeah, the Kinks studio. We were there, we were recording, and already like a few sort of bigger labels came to us, but then Mark got very unwell, and it was a gradual thing because he had COPD, so his breathing was getting harder and his energy. If you look at the early shows, he's jumping around, he's moving around, he's really. And then towards the end, I mean, he found it hard to even walk just down the street, you know. And eventually he was bedridden and heartbreaking. I went to go and see him 2 months before he died. And we were sat there and we hadn't seen each other for a while because we, you know, at the time I was having surgeries. So we both got, you know, quite poorly. And I remember going to see him and yeah, he's there and he's saying, oh, you know, we can follow up now with these labels and we can get this record out. And, you know, it's going to be great. We'll get back on the road. We'll get touring again. And I just knew it wasn't going to happen. Just looking at him, he looked so frail, so weak. And when he died, I remember just, oh, it was really, you know, so many people that I care and love from that whole time are gone. You know, I mean, Alan Wass, another one who I was very close to, and yeah.
What was he like? Obviously, like I've had Dan on who's done a bit of a documentary on him, but
yeah,
what was he like to hang around with? Seemed like a bit of a character.
he was amazing. What I liked about him was he was fearless. I remember one night we were walking across Shepherd's Bush, and someone said, "Hey, cowboy!" They sort of went over to him, and this guy, I think, was trying to like rifle through Alan's pockets, and he just went crack. Alan just whacks him straight, and then of course we're having a fight with this like bloody bunch of nutters on Shepherd's Bush Green, you know. And I like that about him. I like the fact that he was, you know, he was fearless, and we played. I played on stage with him a few times too, and again, you know, he was one of those people that were fully formed in the sense that you walked in, you couldn't take your eyes off him. You know, he looked like someone who could have been in the Stones, but like if they'd sort of travelled via the Badlands of the West, you know.
Yeah.
And he was a great character, and we always had fun, and you know, he was a great songwriter. I mean, you know, I think his music was very that sort of Stones, Faces type era, and you know, I think if he'd gone to America, I think he would have been a huge star. I think he just had that thing that was ready to go. But yeah, his life was tragically cut short. You know, Mark, you know, the terrible thing is that, you know, this industry there is a sort of weird karma to it. You know, I don't know if I can rationalize it, put it into words, but it seems like there's a sort of darker side to it. You know, I mean, I don't want to say too much, but I find the whole thing that surrounding Alan's death to be very suspicious. You know, I find it very hard to believe that someone can, you know, just inject someone and walk and kill that person and just walk, you know, and not do any time for it. You know, I think that's terrible. You know, because but that's clearly what happened. You know, and I have a few sources who told me that it was, well, one of the people that were there that night when he died, and they wanted to tell me more, but they died shortly after. Guy called Marcel. So yeah, I mean, there is a sort of weird thing that goes with this kind of this music scene at the same time. It's a sort of tragedy, you know. I can't explain it. I can't rationalize it or say it's for this reason or for that reason, but you have to be very careful who you trust and who you're around, because, you know, yeah. But I you know, I miss a lot of my friends. You know, I miss Mark. Mark was like a brother to me, really. I mean, we knew each other way before we played in a band together, and yeah, you know, I remember when I don't know if you saw it, but I compiled, I did a little article for him when he passed, and it had everyone from Jamie Hewlett, you know, who did the Gorillaz
Yeah.
artwork. He before he did the Gorillaz, he did Census Things artwork. So people like him, then Eric R. Kelly at Flatbush Zombies, John Perry from the only ones who joined us on the Dead Cut second record, and Pete, of course, because they carried on writing together. Him and Peter did. Do you know that song "Who's Been Having You Over"?
Yeah.
Tomorrow Grace, they co-wrote that together.
Okay.
Yeah, so you know, Mark was really an incredible talent. I mean, again, he was the guy that would teach me. I didn't realize how lazy I was actually until one day I sat down with Mark and he said, "Right, we've written this really cool song," and he's like, well, "That's great, but we've got to write four. We've got to write 4 bangers in one day." And but it was true. He kind of by learning that craft and he just taught me so much. You know what I mean? He was really a powerful and very talented guy. He could write bangers in his sleep. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And, yeah, like, I mean, amazing talent.
Yeah.
I've just feel really lucky to have played with people whose music that I really love and admire. And a bit like I played with Sylvain of the New York Dolls, and it was me, Gary from the Libertines, and Sylvain, and we, you know, again playing songs that I'd listened to since I was a kid. And the last night we played at the 100 Club of that tour. We had Clem Burke from Blondie and Glenn Matlock of the Pistols on bass.
That's it.
You know,
yeah.
just I've been really lucky. You know, I've been really lucky to play with people whose music I'm a really big fan of, that I really love.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, yeah, you mentioned those names. Did you always kind of back yourself in those situations? Like, was like playing guitar something you always felt were you confident with, kind of thing?
In a scenario like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, like, you know, you throw someone into that, they might be a bit phased by it. But you kind of growing up around these names, I guess.
Well, I still was petrified. I mean, I pretended not to be, but I secretly was, yeah. And I still am. I mean, essentially, I may have done quite a lot, but essentially I still do feel like how I felt at, say, 11 when I first picked the guitar up. You know, a music fan who just happens to have gotten ahead and played with the people that I like, you know.
Yeah. Yes. I'm just reading all these names. Yeah. Is there anyone out there that you'd love to play with but you haven't so far?
Sometimes I feel like if I played with everybody I liked, I don't know, like it might not work out, and I might, do you know what I mean? Because there's so much stress and pressure and stuff in this industry that if I played with everybody that I liked, like for example, there's a group called Deaf in June, who I've been a fan of like forever, basically since I was a teenager, and their music's very hard to pinpoint down. It's sort of, sometimes it's very folky, other times it's electronic. It's the press dubbed it neo folk, whatever
Right.
that means. But the music's very sort of pagan and reminiscent of greater times, I suppose, and very spiritual. And I love this guy's music. You know, singer's called Douglas Pierce. I love his music, but I don't know if I'd want to actually write songs or perform on stage with him, just simply because I think sometimes it's good to, if you're really, really connected to a certain style of music or a certain album or an artist, sometimes it's good just to have that distance, you know. It's like, I don't, you know, you if I got to play with everyone that I like, maybe I might appreciate it a little less or something, you know. Not to say that I do with the others. Every experience I've had up to now has been fantastic, you know. Getting, like, for example, I'm really excited to write with Rose McDowell, who also is probably best known for being in Strawberry Switchblade, but she also did some stuff with Deaf in June, Current 93, Boyd Rice, all these people who are part of that scene. So all the time I'm getting to do it still, which in my advanced age, considering it's my birthday today, I won't say how old I am, but I feel very lucky to be doing, you know, because I remember when I turned 30 thinking, oh no, you know, it's all over. But ironically, I had more opportunities in my 30s than I ever had in my 20s, you know. So yeah, I think there are times, obviously, because now we live in an age where, you know, downloads pay you a pittance. You know, for instance, I Dead Cuts did a track with it's a hip hop group called Flatbush Zombies, who are one of my favorite hip hop groups, and we got 250,000 hits for that song on YouTube alone, not to mention all the downloads and that. And I just got I got the first royalty check I was expecting to be really good, and it really was quite disappointing. And that's when I realized, oh my God, you know, what people say about downloads is true. You know, it's like, it's a joke, you know. And I think you know, I know there's stuff like Bandcamp and there's ways around it and that, but you know, I'm, like I said, I much preferred times when, you know, you got signed to a label, you got your money, and all right, you had to pay it back, but you know what I mean? Like, it just, there was a more order and structure to it. Now it's like almost like chaos. You don't know, you know, what's going to happen, and there's no defined structure. Whereas it was basically, when I first started out, you formed a band, you got your single out, and then if the single did well, you did an EP. The EP did well. Then he did an album. Then he did a tour, and then and that way made more sense to me. But now, I don't know. I wouldn't know or really have a clue on how to. Like, someone said, "Oh, why don't you come and do this music panel where you can tell young people what it's like to, and how to get ahead in the music industry?" And I'm like, "You got to be kidding! Is there even a music industry? Let's be honest. Like, I mean, everyone I know that worked in it feels like it's a bit of a sinking ship, really.
All right.
But I mean, what am I going to do? I can't go work in a bank, can I? So it's like."
Well, I was going to say, if you managed to just stay a full-time musician throughout this time, then.
I have, yeah, but I mean, it's not come without its hardships. There's a lot of things I can't do. Like, I can't just suddenly go on holiday when I like, or if I do get to see the world, it's usually because I'm playing in that country. Like, went to go see Poland. Went to Poland recently, played at a festival there, but again, it was like hotel, gig, hotel, airplane. And that's pretty much how I've seen the world. It's like I haven't really had time to do some of the things I'd like to have done, like go on a nice long holiday. And not saying that I can't, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Resources in music are not what they used to be. And it's much harder now. Much, much harder.
So, like, what type of music you playing? Are you in bands, or like, would you be a session musician for people, or how does it work now?
I do both. So I play guitar for there's an old goth group called Sex Gang Children, which ironically I heard in the interview with Pete Wolf. He was
Yeah.
in a band with the original guitarist, which is mind blowing how small this world is. But I've been playing for them recently, and we've got a tour coming up of the UK next month. And I play in a band called Black Bordello, who are like kind of, I don't even know how to describe their music, like a real mix of like avant-garde, sort of jazz, but then it's like a little bit like, I guess, post-punk too. And then I've got a group called Triggers, which is sort of like electronic. Do you remember the Little Uns and Roses, Kings and Castles? Do you remember them? There was Adam Firecheck of Babyshambles.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Castles. So Aaron, who was also in Dead Cuts, I'm doing that with, and he played in Roses, Kings and Castles and Little Uns and all those bands of that era as well. So he's in Triggers. And then Rose McDowell, that I told you about earlier, we're going to do an album together. Worked with an artist called Nicholas Schreck, who is an author but also does music too. So I'm doing quite a lot of things. I find that I like to have a lot of things to do, and because like I said, I've got quite a eclectic taste, so each thing has to be different. And but yeah, it's kept me instead, and I'm able to perform regularly, release records regularly. I mean, I've always got a label that will put my stuff out. I do want to do a solo record. Me and Pete did talk about doing something that hopefully will come to fruition when the time's right. We just haven't been able to get in the studio because either he's been on the road or I've been on the road, or but yeah, I think me and him will do something again soon, and that will be fun. So I've had to stick at it because, to be honest, it's the only thing I'm really good at doing. I did try to do the 9 to 5. It just didn't work. I had this terrible job. It was working in a factory. And I used to get up at 6 in the morning, right? And I'd go down to the factory and it would be dark outside. And I'd go into the factory and then I'd have maybe a 20-minute break, lunchtime, go back, come out and it'd be dark again.
God, yeah.
So, and I just thought, I can't do this to myself.
Sounds like you really like went in the deep end though with that one, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the trouble. I'd never, when I was at school, all I could think about was leaving and doing music. So it was kind of like, back then, music was, like, if I was at school, say 5 years ago, perhaps I wouldn't have. I would have said, okay, music will be something I do as a hobby because now there's not as much money in it. But when I was at school, you know, that was a sort of, if you're working class, that was a dream you had. But you know, you'd either do that or you'd be a bank robber or something. You know, I mean, I would have. Who knows? Maybe I could have gone into crime, but I had a few opportunities to, but I didn't. I was, because I just think music's what I'm meant to do. You know, I think some point in your life you realize what you're good at and you go with it, you know. And like I said, I've had sort of reasonable amount of luck. You know, I've not, the only, I guess, thing I'd say is I would have liked to have earned a bit more cash, and I'd have liked to have had a nice big house, but I've got my memories and my experiences, and they're really precious to me, you know.
And you mentioned Pete Doherty now, like he seems to be coming, you know, through the other side of all the drugs type of stuff. Is that good to see? And like, are you in a place where you've put it all behind you, kind of thing?
Yeah, I think we all are. It's really good, you know. Like when I remember we went to go support the Libertines in 2020. God, 21. It was in Norwich, and the difference in Peter was astounding. You know, he was just so much more articulate and so much more present, and you know, yeah, I mean, what a talent that guy is. You know, I mean, one of the things that really impressed me actually when I first met him was his stamina and the way he could write song after song after song. You know, he'd never put his guitar down, and I think he's, not to say he ever neglected that or anything like that, but I think he's finding that same zest and zeal again. You know, and it's a beautiful thing. You know, I want to see him happy. You know, because he deserves it. You know, he's a great guy, and I count him as one of my dearest friends.
Oh, excellent, mate. Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll support him at some point, and I'll come along and watch.
Yeah, come on down. Yeah, that'd be great. I'm sure it will happen again. You know, that always seems to happen. It's a reoccurrence, definitely.
Yeah. I can imagine, like, if, like, I don't know, the people that have been there since for a while, you kind of feel a special bond with them, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people say that word, that sense, that right place, right time, and I have to say, I remember once being at Peter's, and when he lived in that flat in Whitechapel, and For Lovers had just come out, and like Wolfman rocked up about 4 a.m. and knocked on the door and came in, and I think they just got the pressing of For Lovers, and Peter had this old kind of vinyl player, and he put it on, and I just remember at that point thinking, wow, you know, this is a really great moment. And then, of course, within a year, they were the biggest thing ever. I mean, I remember Babyshambles, that especially that original lineup, they were just so powerful live. You know, you come away from a gig and you know, you felt like a jolt of lightning. You know, it was so exciting to see them play. I loved the second lineup with Mick and everything, but when I would see Pat and Gemma and Drew, but my God, they had such a they were like a powerhouse, you know, on stage.
Hmm.
I don't know if you heard this, but I auditioned Babyshambles one night. It was me and the Parrot Boys. We were all in a room together, and I think I turned up a bit late and maybe a little inebriated, and I think Peter at that point was kind of like wanting to have a more steady type of, you know, thing going on. But actually, that said, I think half of anyone who could play music at that time was auditioning for Babyshambles. But he definitely got the right group together on that early lineup when Pat and that. It was just magic. They were so powerful live, so
Yeah.
powerful. Did you ever see them around that time?
Yeah, in Hull they played on that
The
tour. Yeah,
Adelphi.
it was at the Welly, that one, I think.
Oh, right. I've played the Adelphi a few times.
Oh yeah.
I love Hull. I think it's a great place, man. I really, really enjoyed it down there. You know, like I played the Adelphi probably like 3 or 4 times.
Oh yes.
Great, man. It's a great place.
Yeah. A lot of history in that place. Yeah.
Absolutely, man.
Okay, mate. Like, cheers for
No
chatting. It's
problem.
been great.
No worries.
Just like one to finish on. Like, what is your standout album of the 2000s? Do you think?
That's really difficult. I I was thinking about that when you mentioned it to me. I think one that I really, really love is Fever to Tell by the Yeah Yeah Yeahs.
Mm.
That was like one to put on before going out. Can I name just one more?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, it's hard to name one. Yeah.
You know, Suede, they had a B-sides collection called Sci-Fi Lullabies. And it was just amazing because it's like really nice indie pop tunes, but then sort of very kind of melancholy Scott Walker-esque tracks with French horns. And yeah, that's another one that really sums back. If I think back to that time, you know,
Yeah.
it comes back.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then in
Yeah.
terms of like listening to your music, like bands like the Scuzzies, is it all on Spotify, or where can people listen to
I
it?
think it is. Yeah, I think Scuzzy's on Spotify. Dead Cuts have a few tracks on Spotify, but I'll be finishing this year. Be finishing the last album that me and Mark wanted to do, but like I said, he got sick and we never got to finish it, or I didn't get to finish the parts that I was meant to do. So I'm gonna go do them and get the record out there. The fans are really excited to hear it, and I think it would be a great testament to him.
Yeah. Excellent. And yeah, where can people like keep up to date with your stuff? Is it Instagram?
Just social media, Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, you know, the
Okay.
usual.
All right, nice one, mate. Yeah, I'm gonna check out that music myself, so that'll be cool.
Cool.
But yeah, I'll keep an eye on it and see if you're playing anywhere northwest at some point.
Yeah, stay in touch and definitely, yeah, I'll let you know when we come up to do the Adelphi again.
Yes.
Cool.
All right, cheers,
All
mate.
right, mate.
Yeah, take care and I'll be in touch. Thanks
Take
for
care,
that.
mate. Nice one.
Yeah.